Hello, welcome to Through Lucy's Lens, weekly videos where I go somewhere interesting and hopefully you will find it interesting too. This week I'm at the Black Country Living Museum right in the heart of England. It's a cold, wet and damp day and the smell of coal fires in the air made me want to highlight Christmas time and the Christmas celebrations of our ancestors in this video. There were two general elections in this year. The electorate are called upon to resolve the battle of the wills between the Houses of Commons and the House of Lords. The second election took place following the efforts of the Liberal government to pass its People's Budget in 1909. This would have raised taxes on the wealthy to fund social welfare programmes for the poor. This will also be the last UK general election before the end of World War I, the last on which regular voting extends over several days, the last in which only men can vote, and the last in which a party other than the Conservatives or Labour will gain a majority of seats. In 1910, the life for the majority is still incredibly hard. The working classes are getting fed up of their lot and starting to speak up and make change. In the October of 1910, women chain makers of Cradley Heath in the Black Country, led by Mary MacArthur, win a minimum wage following a 10-week strike. This effectively doubles their pay. In the November of 1910, coal miners in South Wales ballot for strike action, meaning that 12,000 men begin a 10-month strike. The years leading up to the start of World War I were characterised by massive social and industrial unrest across Britain and right here in the Black Country. But here, during Christmas 1910, things might not have felt like they've changed at all in a lifetime. So let's go and have a look. So we're back in 1910 now, and before we go and look at some homes, I just want to talk about what kind of jobs people were doing in this area and many of the industrial working areas of the UK during this time. For the majority, it was a life of hard manual labour. Coal mining, nail making, chain making, iron smelting, gunsmiths, metalsmiths, general factory work, farming, labouring, domestic service were all jobs that came up time and time again for people whose homes I looked at during making this video on the census records. With long hours starting at dawn and ending at dusk, with a half day off a week to attend church. This might beg the question, did people have a holiday at Christmas time? Well, not really. The Christmas Day celebration took place, of course, on December the 25th, and for some, December the 26th too, which is called here in the UK Boxing Day. Some employers would allow a full day off, a day and a half, or for some, just a half day on Christmas Day itself to attend church. If Christmas Day fell on a Sunday, that was really good luck, as it meant you were more likely to be granted a full day off to enjoy your day. Boxing Day, which falls on the 26th of December, was traditionally a day off for servants who'd spent their Christmases serving their household, and leftovers were literally boxed up to hand out to the servants and the local poor. But those not working in service would probably find themselves heading back to work just after one day's rest. The first house we're going to look at, decked out for Christmas, is a back-to-back house. Finally, it's reopened so I can have a look. This house is really interesting as it was built as a miner's cottage and was lived in right up until the 1970s, when it was moved brick by brick here to the Black Country Museum. Back-to-back houses were literally built back-to-back, sharing a rear wall with another row of houses. This design was perfect for industrialists because it maximised housing capacity, but they often came at the cost of proper ventilation, light and sanitation. These homes were typically arranged in narrow streets or courtyards with communal facilities like water pumps and toilets shared. The houses are tiny, with one room on the ground floor with a small bedroom above and a small pantry off the living area. This home is the back house, and the back house afforded cheaper rent than the front house because it was closer to the toilet facilities. And during warm weather or floods, it would have been impossibly unsanitary to our standards today. During Christmas 1910, it was the home to the Bradley family. Head of the household, Joseph, was a miner, and he lived here with his wife, elderly father, also a retired miner, and two of their children. The records do show, however, that Sarah, his wife, had 3 children, although only 2 had survived. I'm not sure how well it comes across how small this house is, but it would have been a tight squeeze. Christmas here would have been a frugal affair, with the children offered homemade toys or a piece of fruit and some nuts as a gift. And the Christmas meal maybe afforded a portion of meat for a family who usually ate bread, dripping and potatoes as their main diet. The house is decorated for Christmas with simple, natural decorations, bringing the outside in with holly, ferns and ivy to mark the season.
Nosy cozy there. Oh yes, I'm in the right place here. Oh yes, yeah. It's a bit nippy on the shoulders out today, so I thought I'd stay here. It's a bit dark. Yes. You need the candles on so we can see what I'm doing. Yeah, no, I bet you do. Oh, lovely. So this is the back to back. Oh, just there's 2 back to back houses. Yes, yeah. So the one behind this wall. Yeah, but there's not a lot in there at the moment. It's not a bit on the table, so you can look through them.
I think if there's not a lot in there, that's quite authentic.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later. The front house was lived in by a smaller family. The head of this household worked on the railways, and he lived here with his wife and 1 daughter. This house had more expensive rent, and it also had better ventilation and light off the street. It basically afforded a better quality of life than the house behind. You can see this from the decor in this house being slightly less cramped, and additions of things like shop-bought toys. Neither of these homes had a Christmas tree. Despite being brought over from Germany and popularised by Prince Albert and Queen Victoria, only those with an expendable income could afford a Christmas tree, or even fit one in their living space. The outdoor toilet in this house is an absolute cracker. It's a tipper toilet. The toilet has a tipping tank inside instead of a cistern tank. The water comes from slop or wastewater from the kitchen or scullery next door. During the 1890s and early 1900s, tipper toilets like this were installed in many backyards of working class houses in the Midlands and the north of England, replacing the pail system. The next houses we're going to see are replicas of a pair of cottages that still stand today on Station Road, Old Hill, here in the Black Country. The earliest record of the cottages dates from about 1848, but they could have been built as early as 1820. At Christmas time 1910, the Newton family lived here. Edward Newton was a coal heaver, a heavy job, and he lived here with a large family. You can see from all the chairs scattered about in the living area just how many people would cram into this cosy space. Another member of the Newton family lived next door, and she ran a sweet shop from out of her front room. I did wonder if that meant there'd be extra sweet treats on the table at Christmas in this household for the young Newtons. I also wondered, as they gathered for their Christmas meal in 1910, had the news spread about the coal mining tragedy at a pit further north in Lancashire. On the 21st of December at 7:50 a.m, an explosion occurred in a shaft at the Halton Colliery in Lancashire. It killed all of the 334 men and boys who were working there at the time. A poignant reminder of how difficult a job it was to work in the mines. This house felt really cosy. And one thing I want to point out is there's no fire on in this house. And my goodness, was it cold. You could feel the cold coming up from the quarry tyres into your legs, through your shoes. And it just made me think, gosh, it must have been absolutely freezing in these houses. But they would have been kept warm and cosy. And I also loved the addition of a piano, which was just a really nice pastime. And there would definitely have been singing around a piano at celebrations such as Christmas back in 1910. On the way to our next house, shall we do a bit of Christmas shopping, getting the supplies for Christmas dinner? Of course we will. So of course, what you had as your celebration meal would depend on your income. But even the poorest would try and provide something special for Christmas. And shopping would be done mostly at local shops like this. General stores that sold everything from essentials to small luxuries. Christmas dinner for everyone would feature some kind of meat. Roast pork, goose, pig's head, sheep's tongue, ham or roast beef. A turkey was expensive and out of the price range of most working people. If you were lucky enough to have a full bird to roast, it would be more likely a goose or maybe a precious hen that you've reared in your own backyard. Some people might join a goose club with their local butcher, and this would save a few pennies when they could towards a whole bird at Christmas time. Your sides would come in the form of fresh vegetables, very much like the ones we enjoy today. Carrots, Brussels sprouts, potatoes, seasonal root vegetables, some of which, if you had the land, could be grown in your own garden. Even Christmas dinner would come with some sort of bread. Bread is a perfect filler. Your bread would also be used to make seasonal sauces, puddings and stuffings. You could also use fresh herbs from out of the garden. Christmas dinner might be toasted by beer, ale, porter, or maybe even a cup of tea. Drinking alcohol was a routine part of everyday life for many of the working classes, and who can blame them? Women would also partake in a drink alongside their husbands or friends. As a treat, you might have roasted nuts, dates or figs imported from throughout the British Empire. Housewives were encouraged to make their own Empire Christmas pudding using ingredients sourced from across the world. People might also bake special cakes or pies using ingredients like rich fruits, spices, and maybe even a splash of brandy if you can afford it. If you were down on your luck, you could always visit the pawnbroker. A pawnbroker was someone who lent money on the security of an object pawned. The pawnbroker earned their money by selling your object if you couldn't repay your loan inside a year and a day. There was, of course, a stigma about having to use the pawnbroker, so sometimes children rather than their parents were sent with things to pawn, and the pawnbroker received them round the back of the shop. It was a common sight to see women standing outside the pawnbrokers with bundles of clothing and bedding waiting for the shop to open on a Monday morning. The woman would then go back later in the week and redeem their bundle when their husbands brought home enough wages. It was a vicious cycle in that once it started, it had to continue. And for many, it was just another way of coping with a life that was in so many ways unfair. I couldn't resist a little peek behind the back of the shops, and I was pleased to find a plethora of washhouses, sculleries, and even a little glimpse into the life behind the scenes of a shopkeeper. I loved to see the tin bath in situ by the fire, ready to wash away a hard day's graft. The next home we're going to visit has been on display here at the museum since 1978, and it originally stood at Lawrence Lane in Old Hill. It's the home of an anchor maker and his family. Edward Parkin lived here with his wife Miriam and 2 sons, and you'll see quite a stark contrast to the houses we've seen previously, because the residents in this house were better off compared to the back-to-back housing and small workers' cottages. This 2-up, 2-down house, which is actually very similar to the house I live in today, represented a huge leap in living standards, featuring gas, mains water, a garden and a wash house for laundry. The toilet is still outdoors, but only the family who lived here could use it. Even though this family had better living standards, I could see from the census records that they had lost 1 child, a stark reminder that childhood illnesses were still rife during this time. You must forgive me for my social faux pas. Hark at me strolling in the front door bold as brass, for this room was for special visitors only to be used on holidays, high days, and in sadder times as a place for laying out a body. The walls are painted in trendy arsenic green, with a beautiful tiled fireplace which would only be fired up for special occasions. This is the first home we've been in to contain a Christmas tree, because this family could afford one. Between the 2 downstairs rooms is a pantry. Cool, under the stairs, it could be used for storing food on a cold slab. We then enter the back room. This is the heart of the house, and it is in this room where the people who lived here would spend most of their time. The fire would be lit always, whatever the weather, to provide cooking facilities and hot water and meals, which would be eaten around the kitchen table. Despite their apparent wealth compared to some of their peers, you can still spot signs of making do, with newspaper cut out to look like lace in the china cabinet. There was also a method in the madness here, for the chemicals used in newspaper printing were great at keeping away bugs. Unfortunately, you can't go upstairs in this house, but there's 2 rooms up there, meaning the parents and children could sleep separately. Another great luxury. The boys would have received stockings on Christmas Day, with maybe an orange, some nuts, and maybe a small toy. Would the young boys in this house be expecting a visit from Santa on Christmas Eve? The tradition of writing to Santa Claus originated with St. Nicholas, who would leave letters for children in their stockings. The earliest recorded letter to Santa in the United Kingdom is believed to have been written in 1895 by a young girl in Lincolnshire. The letter was addressed to Father Christmas in the North Pole, and she requested a paint set. The letter is now part of the archives of the Grantham Journal, and the girl is reported to have received her paints. Back in the 1850s, Santa Claus flew to England from America after the success of a poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, written by an American poet, probably Clement Clarke Moore. St. Nicholas then began to adopt Santa's attributes, spreading his gift-giving all over the world. Father Christmas in England, Papa Noel in France, Los Reyes Magos in Spain, just to give a few examples. Outside of this house is a private yard that contains a really lovely wash house. This one contains all the mod cons for the time, with a washing machine, running water, mangle and even net curtains on the windows. This wash house was not shared, and it would have been a real luxury to have your own private facilities. The lady who lived in this house was lucky. The shop was right next door, she didn't have to lug bags of groceries to and from, and she appreciated it. There's actual verbal history from the museum saying that this lady knew she had it good. The toilet, however, is still outside, but it was also a private facility. No having to share with the neighbours here. Although private or not, the spiders do not care. The final house today is where our most self-sufficient family lived. This cottage used to be situated at 12 Cooper's Bank, Gornal Wood. It was probably built in about 1847, but it was affected by the subsidence as the coal from the Earl of Dudley's mines was dug from underneath the area. Hence, this house became tilted, and it still makes you feel a bit seasick as you step inside. At Christmas 1910, the Bradley family lived here. Joseph, the head of the household, was a clerk in the local mine, and he earned a better wage than his manual labour counterparts. He went to work in a collar and tie. He lived here with his wife Senna and two children, Jack and Rose. The Bradley family considered themselves posh in comparison to other local people. As children, Rose and Jack attended school regularly, and Rose learnt the piano and later went on to work in a solicitor's office, whilst Jack became a work storekeeper and was a proficient violin player. There's a sense of quiet prosperity in this home, from the large purpose-built wash house where Rose remembers the Christmas puddings being made and boiled, to the embroidered tablecloth on the table. There's also decorated china and, albeit homemade from rags, plenty of floor coverings and wallpaper on the walls. At Christmas, Rose remembers the family having a big goose with all the trimmings. The family had a pigsty here where they raised their own pigs for meat and grew their own fruit and vegetables in the garden. Mother made her own jams, sauces and pickles in the pantry. They could also afford a small Christmas tree. Although wealthy in comparison to their peers living in the back-to-back houses, their Christmas was still very much a simple affair compared to what most of us are used to now. Much of the contemporary evidence that I've read about Christmas during this time from normal working class people was memories of family and togetherness rather than presents or weeks of drawn out preparations. It was also a well needed day of rest to let your hair down and enjoy the true spirit of togetherness at Christmas. In 1910, while many still attended church to worship, to celebrate and remember the birth of Jesus Christ, 1910 marked a cusp in social change where Christmas celebrations started to creep towards what most of us do today.
That room was used as a pantry.
thank you for coming with me back to 1910. Unfortunately, it's now time to catch the bus back to modern times. Thank you, as always, for coming with me on my travels and for allowing me to indulge in my passion for social history. It's so appreciated, and I love reading all your comments. Please do subscribe if you like my content, and there's also about 60 more videos just like this if you have the time or inclination. Until next week, a wholehearted thank you and goodbye.